Welcome back to the Football Show, and time to welcome along a man who knows the bodies of Jamie Redknapp and Gary Neville intimately. It's Gary Lewin,
all right,
the former physio.
You're going to be starting another reality show if you say things like that. Watch it.
Wow.
I thought I'd give you the big build-up, Gary. But before we start, I have to say I love that backdrop. That's fabulous. The collection of England shirts you've got there all signed.
Yeah, it's my medical room at home, and so you try and impress the patients when they come in. So yeah, you show off a little bit, I'm afraid.
That would certainly work. Listen, Gary, we want to sort of touch on your career as we go along, but the reason we've got you on primarily is to talk about Project Restart. There's been a lot of discussion about how long it really takes to get elite footballers fit. 3 weeks, 6 weeks? What's your take on it?
I think the problem you've got is, ordinarily, Gaz and Jamie remember the days when the players used to get 8-10 weeks off in the summer, not internationally, but at the club level. The problem you've got now is the different variables because of the COVID-19 virus and all the restrictions put in place. So the biggest issue they've got is getting them up to speed physically without any kind of group sessions or contact sessions. And they're trying to do it in a way that everything's phased. I see the government have announced today they've gone into phase 2. And they're trying to do it in a very progressive way whilst checking the numbers of anyone that becomes positive with the virus.
Yeah, so we're moving to phase 2 this week, which means an introduction of more, certainly, contact-based training. But without the friendly games that the players normally get to build up that fitness, what impact could that have, Gary?
Again, there's so many different things how it could impact. Normally in a pre-season, you'd start off with a couple of weeks of very light training. I would say close contact rather than full contact training, building up into contact sessions, working on the players for their strength, their power, their neuromuscular abilities, to their reaction times. And then you go into contact training with some friendlies where you can slowly build up the amount of competition and intensity over a 6 to 8 week period. Now, the uniqueness of what they're trying to do now is they are going through the phases where they've worked on their physical side. So they've been doing what they call park running. That was pre-phase 1. Then they're going into phase 2 where, again, there's still no contact, there's social distancing, and they're trying to do a little bit of ball work. They're trying to do some of the football work, but without any close contact whatsoever. Then they're going to go into the close contact side of it, which is the next phase before they go into full contact. So the problems that are going to arise is the general conditioning of falling over, getting up, hitting players, colliding with players, and that side of the game, which you only get from intense training sessions and friendly matches, and they're going to miss out on all that. So there's going to be a few problems.
So what sort of problems do you foresee, Gary, then, if we sort of go through this next few weeks without that, and then we start and the players are actually being asked to play more games than they might ordinarily within a fixed period of time, say 6 weeks to finish the season?
I think you begin to see it from the Bundesliga. I read somewhere that there was 8 muscle injuries in the first set of games. I'm not seeing what's happened this weekend. So you would expect to see more muscle injuries occur. If, the boys would turn around and say they called it being a bit rusty when they go back into the games. From our point of view, it's just the reaction times and how the body reacts to jumping, landing, and then that will put pressure on joints. So you could see some significant joint injuries, but I think realistically the main ones that people are worried about are the muscle injuries.
Hi guys, I've seen that obviously, and I don't quite understand the sort of concern around the sort of lack of time to be able to prepare for the matches, to be honest with you, because I don't liken what's just happened in the last sort of 2 months for a player as being pre-season. I liken it to, let's say, for instance, you had a 2-month injury, and all players will have had 2-month injuries, and you obviously have had thousands of them during your career come to you. You'd be out for 2 months where you wouldn't be doing any contact training whatsoever. You'd be obviously doing a little bit with the physios before you got back into training, maybe a couple of weeks where you'd be in the gym all the time and you'd be doing the running. But then as soon as you went back and trained with the team, within maybe 10 days or 2 weeks of training, you'd be playing again. So I don't understand why this is different than having what would be an ordinary 2-month injury for a player, which all players have had, where they would only normally have 10 days, 2 weeks, and then they would go straight back into competitive football. Is it not better to look at it as an injury this last 2 months rather than looking at it as a pre-season layoff?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said, Gaz, is right. I would say the only difference is if I had a player that was out for 2 months, I would bring them back very slowly through what used to be reserve team football. It might be under 21 football now. You would often arrange behind closed doors friendlies to try and increase the intensity of what they're doing to incorporate a match day. That to me is the only difference of what's going on now, is that ability to progress the intensity of what you're doing work-wise into a match situation. At the end of the day, the only way you can replicate a match situation is by playing a game. And so what you're saying is right. The problem we've got is that we're condensing 9 games that are going to decide the season and into a very, very short period of time. So they've got to hit the ground running.
Morning, Gary. I think Gary's touched on the football point of view. But I just want to ask a question. What's the protocol for physios and masseurs, etc.? Is it as normal, or is there a situation where you can only have certain people in and around the players?
Well, as it stands at the moment, and from phase 1 going into phase 2, you're allowed, in phase 1, they were allowed 5 players on the pitch together. I think in phase 2, that goes up to 10. In phase 1, you're allowed 3 members of staff of any discipline. So it might be 1 medic, it might be 2 coaching staff. And the only thing you're allowed to do is emergency action that's signed off by the doctor. So, and if you do, you have to be in full PPE equipment. So you can treat players. It's only for emergency situations or what they deem important treatment or rehab. And you have to wear the PPE equipment.
So, because that in itself, Gary, will cause a problem that, Gary and yourself, we work with Sol Campbell. Sol used to have 2 masseurs after training. And that's what he needed to get him through, as we all remember. Yeah. But it's true, Gary. So some people will need that level of fit to make sure that they're right, because after a game, the lactic acid builds up in the legs or whatever. Yeah. So that in itself is going to cause a problem, because it's not that familiarity. I know it's a case of needs must, but sometimes as much physically, it's mentally what they need to make sure that they're right for the games on a match day.
Yeah, well, I actually think you've touched on the one aspect of all of this that I think is going to be crucial to get them back, and that's the anxiety of returning to football with the COVID virus in the background, the fears of that, and also mentally having the right preparation that they're used to, because there's going to have to be changes to the pre-match preparation. And there's going to be a lot of players, and you both know a lot of players and can name quite a few, that would literally put their socks on, their shorts on, chuck their top on, and out they go and play. And there'll be other players that would do an hour and a half pre-activation before the game to get themselves ready for the game. So there's going to have to be quite a lot of compromise. And I think this is what is happening in these 3 phases, that the players are going to have to get used to real changes in their preparation. And the biggest thing the authorities have got to get over now is the player anxiety. I mean, we've heard of some players that not returning to training yet. And that's the thing they've got to get over, the mental side of it, that players are comfortable returning to play.
Gaz, I mean, that's obviously something that we discuss it nearly every day on this show, that we do it about players that want to return, and we think the majority will, and we think that there'll be some players who opt out, and we know of certain cases already. But what we haven't heard yet is whether some members of staff will opt out. You're obviously still very connected in the game. Are you hearing of members of staff that are nervous about going back and actually won't go back?
I've not heard of anyone that won't go back, because with members of staff, obviously from a medical point of view, we do have the added protection of the PPE. I think there's a general anxiety because we're going into the unknown, and I think anybody in whatever walk of life they're in, if they're going into an environment that they're not sure about, they will become quite anxious. And I think in football, we're seeing the same thing. And again, another part of this phase back into training aspects is to build the confidence with the staff and players that everything is being done that possibly could be done to minimise the risk. I don't think you're going to hear anybody say there is no risk at all that you may catch the virus, but you can catch that anywhere in your day-to-day life. What the football authorities are trying to do is minimise the risk and show everybody within the game and outside of the game that they're doing as much as they can to make the risk as small as possible.